James Swanson, thanks so much for being with us today. End of Days is the book. We've got it here, The Assassination of John F. Kennedy. Talk to me about your approach to this book. I mean, into this subject. So many books have been written on this. It's something like 40,000. What was your approach?
My approach was to write this like I do all my books, like I did with my book Manhunt about the Lincoln assassination, as a true crime thriller. I want the reader to feel like they're back the day it happened. I want the reader to be in the presidential motorcade, to hear the shots, to be in the sixth floor window, to see what Oswald saw. And I really do a ticking clock countdown of the last days and hours of Lee Oswald and his wife Marina and of John and Jackie Kennedy. That's what I seek to achieve. I try to write my books like novels, but everything is true. I don't make it up. I don't make it the dialogue. All the facts are true, but I really want to have that ticking clock immediate pace. And that's why I think it's different from other books about the assassination, because I really take you back to that day.
And it's very much, I mean, in reading it, I was on the edge of my seat in many ways, even though I knew how this would end and know some of the details of what happened. You start with Oswald in this. What was that about? Why did you want to start with him?
Yes, the reason I start with Oswald, the first line of the book is he'd been planning the assassination even before he bought the rifle. Because I want the reader to think that I'm writing about the Kennedy assassination, because nobody remembers that 7 months before Oswald killed John Kennedy, he used that same rifle in a sniper attack to try to murder a U.S. Army general in Dallas. He missed his head by an inch. And he ran home. He escaped on a city bus and ran home.
And he had plotted it out. He
yeah,
had it in notebooks.
He did a notebook. He took photographs. He staked out the general's house. He stalked him until one night in April, he saw the general sitting at his desk through a plate glass window, and Oswald opened fire and almost got him. He just missed. And if only the police had caught Oswald that night, if only his wife had turned him in when she found out about it,
right,
President Kennedy would have gotten through Dallas alive, because Oswald would have been in jail.
Right.
The police would have had his rifle.
Yeah.
It's one of those many strange twists that if something had gone just a different way, the president would have never been assassinated.
And talk about his psychology at that moment and in those days in November. Oswald, what is he thinking? What does he want to achieve?
Well, he's a lifelong loser, high school dropout at age 15. A terrible record in the U.S. Marine Corps. He did learn to do one thing well in the Marine Corps, which is shoot a rifle with accuracy. Interested in communism and socialism. The Marines nicknamed him Oswaldkovich.
Right.
He tried to defect to the Soviet Union. He was a man always in quest of something, in quest of greatness. Minimum wage jobs, fired, couldn't hold a job, always thought he was smarter than everyone. Right. Always thought one day his genius and his greatness will be recognized. And then here he is in Dallas. He just had a new baby born. He couldn't even afford shoes. He's fighting with his wife. They're living separately. And then he learns from the newspapers that the President of the United States is going to drive past the building.
Because they print the route in the paper.
And
right.
Coincidentally, he got a job there 6 weeks before. He wasn't stalking Kennedy. He wasn't hunting him across the country. He was just living his lackluster life. And then he realized, fate is intervened again. Now I have another chance to do something that people will remember forever. And I'm convinced that's how his countdown began.
And Kennedy, if you look at how he was doing as a president, if you look at his approval ratings in February of 1963, they are 70%. By October 1963, they are 59%. The dip, of course, because he is taking a more robust stance on civil rights. He gives that speech in June. A lot of the decline having to do with the Southern decline in terms of his popularity.
Exactly. Kennedy was never in the first rank of civil rights warriors. Lyndon Johnson was more of a civil rights man at that point than President Kennedy. It's not that he was against civil rights, of course. He was afraid of the Martin Luther King speech in August '63. He thought he might have to shut down the march because of violence. He had the National Guard ready. JFK, of course, always believed in equal rights, equality under the law. He was horrified at how people were treated in the South, but it was not at the forefront of his policies. His main interest was foreign affairs, anti-communism, the military, missile defense, the space program. He was coming closer to being a true civil rights man, and certainly, had he lived, that would have been a great priority later in that term and in his second term if he had won re-election.
And on the night before, in some ways, he predicted his death almost exactly.
He did. It was the strangest thing. He was always a fatalist. He never thought he would live long.
Because he was always so ill.
Yes. His favorite poem was I Have a Rendezvous with Death, written by a fellow Harvard graduate killed in the First World War. He's in his late 30s, early 40s. He asked Jackie to read that poem aloud to him regularly in bed What?
Wow. How romantic.
And then the morning of November 22nd, he's in Fort Worth. He's getting ready to fly to Dallas in the motorcade. He says, Jackie, last night when we got to Fort Worth would have been a hell of a night, his words, to assassinate a president. It was dark, it was crowded, it was raining, the crowds were pushing and jostling us. A man could have pulled the pistol out of a briefcase. And another thing, Jackie, a man with a rifle in a tall building could assassinate me. Nothing would stop him. So why worry about it?
And so, obviously, a lot of conspiracy theories come out of the death that day. And looking at sort of the belief of Americans, going back to 1963, 52% thought someone else had to be involved. How could Oswald, this high school dropout, pull it off himself? By 1983, it's 74%. It's shooting up. 2003, 75%. 2013, 61%. At a high of 81% at one point, in part because of the Oliver Stone movie. What do you make of the conspiracy theories? A lot of people say, oh, it was the mafia, CIA, Castro.
The FBI, the Russians, Lyndon Johnson, the Texas oil men. These conspiracy theories are numerous and in conflict with each other. And to this day, no one has proven with real hard factual evidence that it was other than Oswald. We have dozens of pieces of evidence that point to him. 3 workers in a 5th floor window right below Oswald heard the 3 shots. They heard the empty brass cartridge cases drop on the wooden floor above their heads. 10 people in the street saw that rifle barrel pointing out the window. They saw it as the assassination happened. Oswald was the only employee who fled the building. An hour later, he murdered a Dallas policeman by shooting him in cold blood. 4 times with a pistol, once through the head, as witnesses hear him mutter, "Poor dumb cop." And he walks away. When he's captured in the movie theater, he pulls that pistol out and tries to shoot more policemen. They stop him and they subdue him. Dozens and dozens of pieces of evidence point to Oswald. To this day, no one has overturned the verdict of the Warren Commission. We know more than the Warren Commission ever did. We have better science and technology than they had. I think 50 or 100 years from now, people are one day going to say, can you believe there was once a time when people thought there was a conspiracy? Once upon a time, everybody thought the world was flat. And now we know it's not. The reasons for the conspiracy are more intriguing, why people believe that. But in terms of the facts of the conspiracy, it has not been proven. And
in some ways, it's the great man theory of history, right?
Yes.
Who could, I mean, how could this poor schmuck murder this great man?
Yeah, the universe is out of order. You know, how could a loser like James Earl Ray kill a great man like Martin Luther King? How could a loser like Oswald kill a great man like President Kennedy? We've resorted to conspiracy theories for hundreds of years in American history to explain troubled times or difficult moments. The thing that bothers me about our obsession with the conspiracy theories, it takes us away from the tragedy and the emotion of that day. A wife lost her husband. 2 little children lost their father. A nation lost the president. And I think it's very important for the 50th anniversary we not make November 22nd Lee Harvey Oswald Day. He would love it. Oswald would be thrilled to know that we talk about him to this day. We speculate about who he was, what were his motives,
who put him up to
who was working with him. Oswald wanted to be remembered. He wanted to make his mark in history. And he did.
He certainly did. And also, everything captured on television. I mean, it very much sort of the creation of the television as the place people go for news. And even you see on that day with Oswald, the cops sort of parading him in front of reporters so that all the world could see and hear from him.
Oswald is giving his own press conferences in the hallway. He gave half a dozen of them. It's unbelievable. It was really the first mass media television event that brought the nation together through one single news event.
Right. And you talk about one of the things that in some ways fuels the conspiracy theories is some of the evidence is missing, right? Primarily John F. Kennedy's brain. You have a theory about where his brain might be.
It's true. Of course, you know, the purpose of my book was to write this true crime thriller and also very much write a book about Jackie Kennedy, because this is very much her story too. She was a great American hero that weekend, so I follow her very closely. But I did discover President Kennedy was buried without his brain. There's no dispute about that. It's true. Then the brain was kept in a steel container that was stored in a Secret Service file cabinet in the executive office of the president. Then it was transferred to a room in the National Archives where Evelyn Lincoln, JFK's former secretary, was processing his papers. Then, on of all days, Halloween, 1966,
Right.
it's discovered that a footlocker containing the brain, tissue slides, blood samples, skull fragments, it's all gone. It's all vanished.
Who knows
and to
where
this day, that material has never been found.
I want to go back here. Jackie Kennedy, this book also about her, very pivotal in terms of creating the idea and the myth of Camelot.
Yes, well, the tragedy she experienced was harrowing. Her husband is murdered while she holds him in her arms. Her face is inches from his in the car when his head explodes from that final third shot. Her pink suit is stained with his blood, and she won't take it off all day. She says, I want the people to see what they've done.
Right.
Americans are horrified when the plane lands in Washington. It's the first look the American people are going to get at Jackie after the assassination. And there she stands at the door of Air Force One, covered with blood.
With RFK next to her.
Yeah, it's on her legs, it's on her shoes, it's on her dress, it's on her hands. But she decides, history will remember my husband well, the way I want history to remember. So on the 1-week anniversary, she summons Ted White, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, to her home in Hyannisport, and she tells him, at night, we used to listen to this Broadway musical, Camelot, the one brief shining moment. And she says, Jack's favorite line was this one brief shining moment. Once upon a time, there's a place called Camelot.
Yeah.
And Jackie says, it will never be that way again. There'll never be another Camelot. She says it 3 times. White goes to her bedroom, writes up the story, and then she edits it. He lets her edit it.
He's on the phone with his editor. She's there sort of editing it with him. Yeah.
And the editors in New York say, hey, what's with this Camelot? Is she standing right there listening
Right.
to you? And
Yeah.
she was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life printed it. That night, Jacqueline Kennedy single-handedly created the most powerful and enduring myth in American political history, that legend of the golden age of John Kennedy. She created it.
She did. She did. James Swanson, it's a fantastic book. End of days. Good luck with this, and thank you for writing it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Joining us today.
Thank you.
Take care.